What's up, New Hope family? Welcome to the Grow Podcast. My name is David. With me, as always, is Pastor Leo. We are here to help you take a next step in your relationship with Jesus. We're so glad you're here. Hello and welcome to episode 121 of the Grow Podcast. I'm David. I'm very glad that you have joined us today. Leo, thank you for being here.
Hello, ¿cómo está everyone?
Just heard some weird squeaking noise from the room next door, so I'm excited about that.
It's almost Halloween.
That's definitely what's happening. Right next to where we record the podcast here at New Hope, they're setting up like just a terrifying Halloween experience.
Oh yes,
that sounds right.
Oh yes.
Is Trunk or Treat going to be like a real haunted house this year? Just going to terrify all of the children. Do you guys celebrate Halloween in the Philippines?
We're starting to. It's starting to become more popular now.
Okay.
But it coincides with two very Roman Catholic traditions. What's that? All Saints Day, which is the 1st of November, and All Souls Day, which is the 2nd of November. So, the older generation,
which is very Catholic,
tend to observe those two rather than Halloween, but the younger generation tend to observe the latter.
Okay.
So
they've embraced dressing up for candy.
Yes. Candy, of course, is a big reason.
Right. What on earth would be the point of Halloween if there was not candy? My goodness.
I mean, we can try giving apple slices, but
no, thank you. My son, my son is 6 and is already done dressing up, and I'm very proud because I was as well by that age. Dressing up just wasn't my thing.
That takes after his dad.
And we've asked him over, like, what do you want, like, buddy, what do you want to be for? He's just nothing.
Just give me candy.
All right. I think I even told him, I was like, I don't think you can, like, we're not gonna have you like trick or treat without a costume. And he's just like, yeah. I'll probably put like a Twins jersey on him and just be like, you're Pablo Lopez today. There you go, buddy. Or put his Adam Thielen Vikings jersey on. It's like, you just wear that on a normal day anyway.
Yeah.
Just tell everyone you're Adam Thielen so they give you candy.
There you go.
What would be like a traditional, if I was trick-or-treating, what's the city you're from in the Philippines?
Manila.
You are from Manila. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm in Manila. Let's say I'm in like the fancy neighborhood. Like, we have Snob Hill here in Williston that everybody goes trick-or-treating to.
Yes.
Because they give full-size candy bars away, which is insane.
That's so true.
So I'm in the Snob Hill of Manila. What kind of candy am I going to be given on Halloween?
That would be the imported kind, which would here in
just American candy
would be American candy. But if you were in the
not Snob Hill portion,
of the Philippines, or in Manila especially, you're gonna get local candy. Like it's almost the same thing. Like we have chocolates and mint candies. And
give me like a specific one, like your favorite local candy.
My favorite local candy would be I have that too. Like the Copico.
Copico.
Yeah, it's coffee candy.
Oh, gross. No kid don't give kids coffee candy. This is a public service announcement.
You're giving them sugar
here on the Grow Podcast.
Caffeine at the same time.
Well, give them a can of Mountain Dew before. Kid wants your coffee candy. Get out of here, Leo.
There's a different kind of candy, like we call what was that? White Rabbit. It's more like chewy kind of candy.
Like a gummy candy?
No, not kind of gummy, but it's like what's that?
Like taffy? Nougat. Ooh, now you have my attention. White Rabbit.
White Rabbit is what it's called.
Well, and if anyone wants to send me and Leo some White Rabbit.
I will not say no.
Yeah. Wait a minute. By the way, we're getting towards the end of October now when this goes out, but it's Pastor Appreciation Month. And so I just want to say, as a pastor that I get to work with, I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
And I know everybody at PH, maybe not everybody. There's probably like one person at PH Church that's like, I'm done with this guy. But for the most part,
Daniel.
yeah, it's Daniel. I know how much you mean to everybody at that church, how much you mean to people at New Hope as well.
Thank you.
So I just want to appreciate you and tell you how thankful I am for you, your friendship, the chance to learn from you, to work with you. It's been really cool. So if you haven't
has been great.
reached out to your pastor yet, whether you go to PH Church or New Hope, or maybe you go to a different church,
right?
And you just really, really love the Grow podcast, that's awesome. Make sure that you take some time to appreciate your pastor this month. The work that they do for the kingdom is important. It is often thankless at times. Like there are other. By no means is being a pastor the only thankless job, but it is one of them sometimes. And so it's just a really great month to appreciate them, to find a way to serve them, or show how much you love them. Shout out to my dad, who I know joins on the Grow podcast, who is a pastor, who probably has commented on this video by the time you watched it. But happy
I
Pastor
love reading his
Appreciation
comments,
Month.
by the way.
He's a interesting fellow. I believe he sassed me a few weeks back about blaming me for all the rabbit trail. Although I think he did put some of it on you.
Yes.
But anyway, well, we're gonna get into Romans here quick. But you have brought a treat.
Yes.
This week. It's been a couple weeks now. What did you bring today before we jump into Romans 9:14 through 29?
This is a mix of two Filipino foods.
Is one of them balut?
Yes.
Well,
it has balut inside with the shell. No, it's rice cake, rice cake bao. Pork bows is
bao?
like you know that white round.
Hello.
Yeah, no, not the bao thing.
Oh.
It's BAO.
Oh, okay.
It's a pork bun.
Okay.
It's a pork bun that is that came from Chinese people that they taught us how to do. But
Nice. Okay.
It's the filling is that part of it. And it's wrapped in
It's a weird
rice
texture.
cake.
Oh, it's a real weird texture.
It's rice cake.
Is it supposed to be cold?
Yeah. You can eat it warm or you can eat it cold.
Is this cheese on top of it?
With cheese on top of it and salted egg.
And
yes,
I don't trust
really
you
good.
around eggs. So what do you call this?
Rice cake. I'm not gonna call it the Tagalog one because our Tagalog name for the rice cake is a swear word in Spanish. Okay. So if I say it, the Spanish people are gonna go, "What did he just say?"
All right.
So yeah, it's rice cake.
I'm a little scared of this one.
No,
I don't understand what's inside of it.
It's pork filling.
But it's cold.
I know it's cold. I wanted to warm it up, but I can't microwave it because it's gonna dry it up. Go for it. It's cold though. I'm so sorry.
The temperature is really throwing me off.
Right. You can heat it up later, but
yeah. I think I would really like it if it was warm.
We can steam that up.
But
later.
It's jarring.
Right.
It's
jarringly cold.
It has good flavor though.
Yes.
I enjoy the flavor.
Like just imagine it like warm.
I mean, I'm trying to, but it's very not warm.
Right. Especially like now in this room.
Yeah, this room's nice and cold.
Yes.
Which I love. I don't know if you're a cold room person.
I am.
Well, that's tremendous news. Well, thank you. I am gonna try it warm somehow. Because
just heat it up in the microwave.
That's really
just a
bizarre.
few seconds.
Just a few seconds. All right, I will do that. Thank you, Leo.
Yeah, because I can do that, but it's gonna be cold by the time you eat it. So I was thinking, it's like,
Well, why don't we jump into Romans?
Sure.
Excuse me. Still have a little bit of that cold I talked about last episode because, spoiler alert, we're recording this on the same day.
Right.
So it's a little peek behind the curtain for some of you. Sometimes we record 2 of these. In fact, most of the time we record 2 in a day.
Yes, we do.
And so if you're listening to this right now and you're like, okay, they're in the middle of Romans chapter 9 right now, but I read ahead. and I want to go ask Leo about like the first couple verses of chapter 10. He's probably already recorded the podcast for Romans chapter 10. You can do that. That'd be great. But no, we're in Romans 9:14 through 29.
Yes.
Like we said it last time, but we're doing 3 weeks on Romans 9, just like we did on Romans 8. So why don't you just kind of give us your normal summary? What should we walk away from these verses?
Okay, so last week we talked about what Paul said, especially toward the end of the episode. Not all who are descended from Israel are Israel, meaning there is a physical Israel based on descent and a spiritual Israel. So in 14 to 29, Paul continues to teach us this idea. All Jews belong to the larger Israel by birth, but only those Jews called by God belong to the true Israel. So personally, I think we can look at our situation today and say the same thing between those who call themselves Christian, quote unquote Christian, because of their religious affiliation or for whatever reason, and those who are called by God, who are what God considers as quote unquote true Christians.
I think Paul asks a fair question at the start of verse 14. Is there injustice on God's part? But I think that's,
yes.
If you're reading along, and especially, if you missed last week, make sure you go back and listen to it. But as we got to the end of last week, and he's talking about the elect, and he's talking about, I loved Jacob, but I hated Esau. And even though that hate might not have specifically meant like, man, I really hate the Yankees, because I hope we all hate the Yankees, and they missed the playoffs this year, and it was wonderful. But anyway, it's not that type of hate. It's but still, it's like you're picking this one, not picking that one.
Right.
Like, in what way is that fair? If only those who get, if I'm Esau, okay, let's just go with that. Like, Jacob, I loved, Esau, hated. If I'm Esau, I'm like, well, screw this.
Right.
Like, why would I even try to do anything good? Why would I try to follow God? Yep. Like, he clearly hasn't picked me yet, because I'm not currently following him. Therefore, I'll just do whatever I want. Yep. And then if at some point he picks me, I guess then I'll start doing good stuff.
Yeah. I guess I'm not one of the cool kids.
Yeah, exactly. I've never been one of the cool kids. So
nah, me neither.
Me and Esau would get along.
But yeah, okay. So the key to understanding this is to put God's justice and righteousness in the proper and biblical context. To call something right or wrong, or just or unjust, demands a standard. Right? You can't say it's right if you don't have a standard for rightness. Like, what makes it right? You can't say something is just if you don't have a standard. So that standard is nothing less than God's own character. So for those who are saying that this reasoning is circular, like you have a standard and then God is that standard and then God is right, so everything is circular. Remember in Romans chapter 3 and verse 25, it says there, for God presented Jesus as the sacrifice for sin. People are made right with God when they believe that Jesus sacrificed his life, shedding his blood. This sacrifice shows that God was being fair when he held back and did not punish those who sinned in times past. So for further details, you can go and watch episode 108 again. We talked about that at length. So, but to answer that question, Paul is showing us that God is acting justly when he acts according to his own person and plan. So keywords, his own person and plan, not ours. We can't just call like, God, you're being unjust, and I'm using your standard as my standard, but you're being unjust. So it's his own person and plan, not ours. So last week's point again is our point again here again.
Oh boy.
It's all about God. It's not about us. Yeah. We are not the center of the universe. We are not the reason why everything exists. It's all about God. And this is what this is the point that Paul makes in verses 15 to 18. Paul makes two arguments to support each with a quotation from the OT, followed by the ever lovable therefore. So if you want to read it, go ahead.
So let's talk about verse 15.
Mm-hmm.
For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion.
Yes.
He certainly seems to just be saying, like, I do what I want. Like, you were just talking about, like, God's justice and righteousness, and there's a standard, right? And that standard is God's character. How am I supposed to comprehend what that standard is when he's just like, I'll have compassion on who I want to have compassion on? Like, well, there's not much of a standard there for me to be able to understand. And again, it goes back to that.
It's like a
question.
random choice.
Yeah, and it goes back to that question Paul asks again himself in verse 14, because he loves to ask himself.
It's like I said, it's like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
It was right.
I think he was lonely, so he just started talking to himself, right. And he's like, Paul, what shall we say then? And I feel like it adds to that question. Like, isn't this unfair? Isn't this unjust? And then going back to what I was saying about if I'm Esau, like, what's the point of trying to figure out that standard and live to that standard if God's just like, well,
that's true though.
Like, I do what I want.
That does make sense, and a lot of people ask that question, right? Because it does make sense. But here's the thing: what Paul is saying is this: receiving favor from God does not depend on anything we do. It doesn't depend on anything that I do, you do, we all do. It depends on God's own will to show mercy. So here's a common mistake. The common mistake that we make is that we put our character and especially our flaws on God. We keep thinking, I make mistakes when I make decisions, so since God seems so arbitrary, God seems so random in what he's doing, maybe what he's doing is a mistake. Maybe the decision that he made is a mistake. We project our own flaws onto God. And here's something that we also don't take into consideration. God knows all things. God knows the past, the present, and the future. He is beyond time. He is the one who created time. By definition, is beyond time. So it is through this foreknowledge, because he knows what's going to happen in the future, that God makes those decisions and choices. In other words, God already knows what all of us are going to do. So no matter, like, for example, if there's a road in front of you, there's a fork in the road, God knows what's going to happen if you choose the left fork. God knows what's going to happen if you go the other way. You go through the middle, like you forge your own path. God also knows what's going to happen. So
and not only does he know what's going to happen, but he knows which of those decisions you're going to make.
Right.
So, like, it's not like you get to that fork and you're like, "Ooh, I'm going to really surprise him on this one. I'm going left.
I'm going to juke."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't think we can juke God with our decisions. Right. Yeah. So it's not only the knowledge of, like, well, what would happen with but it's this is the one that is going to happen.
Yes.
And I know. Yeah.
So God knows all of it. So Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 4 says, we were chosen in him before the foundation of the world. Think about that. Before the foundations of the world were made, we were already chosen in him. So this explains how that happened. God knew me. God knew you. God knew all of us and everyone else in the future. And on that basis, God made his election or his choice. And another thing, and this will sound messed up. So that's this fair warning. This is gonna sound messed up. For those who are saying that God is unfair or arbitrary, I want you to realize something. Realize that you are putting yourself at a higher moral standard than God. The mere fact that you are claiming that God is wrong or God made a mistake in his decision, you're putting yourself at a higher standard than God. What you're really saying is, I know, I see, and I understand something that God doesn't. So he's making the wrong decisions. It should be my standard, not God's. So, but here's the thing. What standard are you measuring God against? See, here, and this is where it sounds messed up. If everything good comes from God and you're saying that God is wrong, then what standard are you using to define what you call good without borrowing from God's nature?
So
kind of ends up with a...
Yeah, I it's not as if God never intervenes, though. Like he even, so you mentioned that, like, he quotes scripture twice.
Right.
And the second time he says, it's in verse 17, for scripture says to Pharaoh, for this very purpose, I have raised you up, that I might show my power in you, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. And so, we say, like, okay, God knew who was going to choose him, who's going to turn from him. But, like, here's an example where he's saying, like, I'm the reason you got to where you are. And it was for me. It was for me.
Right.
And even if we accept that reality that, excuse me, everybody, even if we accept that reality that, okay, not everything revolves around me, it's about God, not me. But this still, he brings up Pharaoh, which I'm curious as to why you think he goes with Pharaoh. But I also am like, this is just another instance of it seeming like boy, sucks to be Pharaoh, because God's just gonna like you didn't have anything to do with any of it, and you didn't have the choice.
It's like he would have gone another way if it weren't for God.
That
kind of thing.
If I just sit here and I read verse 17 and 18, because he reads that scripture, and then in verse 18 it says, so then he has mercy on whomever he wills, and he hardens whomever he wills. So if I read verses 17 and 18, I'm going, okay, Pharaoh got screwed because he didn't have any choice.
Sucks to be you.
Yeah, it did. I mean, but go back and read Exodus. It did suck to be Pharaoh, but.
Well, here's the thing. Paul uses Pharaoh to show again that God is free to act as he wishes. But this one comes like from a negative point of view. Paul quotes Exodus 9 verse 16, and the idea with his quote is that God used. Hold on.
He quotes Exodus 9:16 in Romans 9:17.
Yeah.
Whoa! I bet we can figure out the date of Jesus coming back. But no, I'm just kidding.
It's tomorrow.
We won't. It might be. You don't know.
Like, who knows? It might be 5 minutes later.
I'm just kidding. But that did. I didn't connect those dots until this moment. Those dots don't matter because the chapters and verses were added long after the fact, but it definitely caught my eye for a second. Okay, please
it's cool,
continue.
right?
It's
a cool coincidence. But anyway, okay, so God used Pharaoh to accomplish his, meaning God's, own purpose, and we talked about that. Verse 18, though, shows us that the freedom of God to act as he wishes can have both positive and negative impacts. God's message to Moses shows that he is free to show mercy to whomever he wants, and if so, then God is also free to harden the heart of whomever he wants.
And that's where the question that people ask all the time comes up, especially when you argue predestination versus free will, and I'm a staunch Calvinist arguing with an Arminian, and I know everything. But assuming that we're accepting what you just said, it's a rational question then to say, what is the point of me trying to do anything good, of trying to follow Jesus?
Right. If we're all predestined anyway.
If I'm just predestined, and at any moment God can just, or not can, because obviously he can, but he's just going to decide to harden my heart if he wishes. So what's the point?
Well, in the story of Moses and Pharaoh, we see, and this is something that we don't pay attention to. We see several times the line, Pharaoh hardened his heart against the Lord. Pharaoh hardened his heart. Pharaoh hardened his heart. Pharaoh hardened his heart. Then the Bible suddenly says the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh. So before Pharaoh hardened his heart, Pharaoh, and then the Lord hardened his heart. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh. So here, Pharaoh is hardening his heart, and then finally God moves in and then sets him in that hardened condition. So when we look at it this way, it doesn't seem arbitrary anymore. In other words, we can go so far in hardening our heart against God to the point that God sets us firmly in our ways. Like, you want to be like that? That's when God says, okay, you know what? Your will be done. And this is a lesson for all of us. We need to be careful. If we are still hardening our heart against God, be very, very careful, because we might come to a place where God will make that decision firm in our heart.
let's move towards the kind of the last 10-ish verses now for today, which we spent a lot of time on the first 6-ish.
Yeah, because it's important.
It is very important. And then, so he starts talking about how, God, he uses a potter and clay as an example.
Right.
Which at the time was probably a very relevant, commonly understood example.
Yes.
I think if we went to youth group tonight, because it's Wednesday today, so if we went over to the youth group, let's just say we grabbed 20 of the kids in youth group, 10 middle schoolers, 10 high schoolers. And we asked them to give us details on pottery. We'd find 2. One of them who's like grandma loves pottery, and the other one did 1 week of pottery during their art class in 7th grade. But obviously at the time, excuse me, everybody. At this time, Paul is writing to a group of people who would be very familiar with pottery.
Yes.
It was very important and common practice at the time. But
yes.
And even I feel like when I was growing up in the 90s, the potter and the clay imagery was pretty heavily pushed. And even though I've never potted, I've never molded clay with my hands into something useful. The imagery was so prevalent and that it was still familiar.
Yep.
So why is it that, why is he using, first of all, maybe, you might need to help us a little bit with why, so the imagery for some of us who don't understand pottery, but also, why is that the example he uses and what's the message he's trying to get across here in these last few verses we're talking about today?
All right. So, let's all think about the potter and the clay for a bit. The potter has the power.
Now, when you say the potter, are you talking about Harry Potter?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The one with the...
This is a Harry Potter reference in the Bible. It's amazing. You can connect the dots. But no, I'm just kidding. I've actually never read a Harry Potter book.
Yeah, me neither.
More than I read one chapter when I was in 4th grade. I was like, this isn't for me.
I was a big still am a big Dungeons and Dragons fan. So
nerd.
Nerd.
But actually, since I've worked here, I've actually played Dungeons and Dragons a couple times. It's pretty fun.
Cool.
It's pretty fun.
And
have you ever played with Pastor Andrea?
Not yet.
Oh man, you need to talk Dungeons and Dragons with Pastor Andrea sometime.
Well, there we go. Since
anyway, we'll have a Dungeons and Dragons podcast later.
No Harry Potter
Hold on,
here.
Real quick. How old are you?
44.
45. So you were like a kid in the 80s and early 90s. Dungeons and Dragons was evil in the church when I was a kid. I had no idea what it was. But so was Harry Potter, ironically. Yes. And now it's the most every church family reads Harry Potter to their kids. But that cracks me up. Anyway, sorry, I couldn't skip the Harry Potter joke, and my dad's going to rant in the comments about the rabbit hole I brought us down. I apologize. Please continue talking to us about the Potter.
Okay, so the Potter has the power to shape a lump of clay however he wants. He can make a beautiful, nice, and good vessel, or he can make a vessel to be thrown away.
That would be every vessel I made if you asked me to do pottery.
That's true. Me too. So the main point, and this ought to knock us off our high horse called moral greatness. So God is long suffering, and we talked about that just now. He showed that with Pharaoh. He let Pharaoh get by with so much before he finally struck with power. There are people today who, unfortunately, misinterpret God's long-suffering as weakness. They misinterpret God's long-suffering as approval, so that they can do whatever they want. Yeah. And that is a huge mistake. God is long-suffering, but that doesn't mean that he's okay with it. There will come a time when enough is enough, and God will strike with power and set us firmly in our ways. So remember the letter that we read last week from the atheist writing to Ray Comfort. And this is the bottom line for us today. Do you consider yourself to be compassionate of other humans? If we're right about God, then we should be running the streets mad with rage at the unbelievers' blindness. Imagine the horrors hell must have in store for them if the Bible is true. You're just gonna allow that to happen and not care about saving anyone but yourself? And remember Ray Comfort's follow-up comment, if we have great heaviness and sorrow in our heart for the lost, we will warn them of the reality of hell and how to avoid it. That's the bottom line. Again, no head, heart, and life change.
Those will come next week.
Those will come next week.
Because we're going to do an entire podcast on 4 verses.
On 4 verses.
This is the least number of verses we have done a podcast on.
It's going to be so hard to read because it's too long.
Right. Yeah, you have time to read these 4 verses at least a couple times before next week. But yeah, so next week, Romans 9, 30 through 33. But this week,
questions first.
I was just setting it up, Leo. You got to trust me. This is my 121st episode.
I still don't.
That's probably smart. Actually,
don't.
That's probably smart. But yeah, I was go ahead and get to those questions, Leo.
Okay, so here's the first question. Why do so many people assume that God's mercy is something that they're owed? Ouch. Ouch. If we have received God's mercy, how ought we respond to that? Okay, second question.
This is the one I want in the comments as well. So
one for the comments.
And real quick, we don't just do that because it's cool someone commented on our podcast. We talk about it all the time at New Hope, but we grow best when we're in community.
Yes.
That's not like a fun little tagline that we invented at New Hope. That's biblical.
Yes.
It comes from Scripture, and it's reality. We grow best when we're in community. And the Grow podcast is a community of us who come together every week. And right now we're studying Romans. And so it might be out of your comfort zone. It might be an extra hassle because maybe I just put it on my phone and listen to it while I get ready in the morning, or I'm listening on streaming service. But take that extra step this week to connect with this community and grow better together.
Yes.
And so I want us to answer question number 2 in the comments, as many of us as possible. Take that step to grow in community together. All right, Leah, what's question number 2?
Here we go. In what ways does God's mercy encourage you to share Jesus with others?
That's the main. You can answer this next part if you want to, but that's the main part I want in the because this is a 2-part. I don't want to. No spoiler alert here, but this is a 2-part question. But that part right there. In what ways does God's mercy encourage you to share Jesus with others? That
is so true, because that is important.
Big time.
Second part of that is, what are you currently doing to share God's mercy with those around you? So,
and if you feel like you want to share that too, don't jump in there to brag about how holy you are, because I'm sharing all. But it might be helpful for someone else to hear.
Again, there might be someone.
It's a reasonable way.
I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how to share Jesus with my friends, and your answer just might give them an idea.
Yep.
So.
All right. Question number 3.
All right. Number 3 is: have you ever considered that it was God's mercy to soften your heart and not further harden it, as He did with Pharaoh? How does this realization change how you view yourself in light of God's goodness? Sobering.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. Well, we love you, New Hope family. I know Leo and I really appreciate.
Yes, we do.
Excuse me. Really appreciate all of you, the time you take out to grow with us, to jump in the comments like we were talking about. We always read those, and I know Leo's always in the comments as well, answering and interacting with all of you. And so make sure that you do that, but then come back next week as we finish up chapter 9. Thank you again, Pastor Leo.
You're welcome.
Happy Pastor Appreciation Month.
Thank you so much.
We're going to have a party next episode.
Ooh,
we're probably not going to do that. I'm not a very good party planner, but I'll tap you on the back or something. In fact, I'm going to do it right now. You can't stop me. There it was.
There it was. Thank you so much.
Thanks to all of you. We love you, and we will see you next time.
All right. Ingat.